My mother-in-law shredded my wedding dress hours before I walked down the aisle. Everyone told me to calm down, said I was being dramatic. 6 months later, I opened my own bridal boutique. Business thrived. Then wedding invitations arrived in their mailboxes. When they saw me in my creation, jaws dropped. But when they discovered who would design their daughter's dresses next, that's when Victoria finally understood the consequences of scissors and champagne. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light streamed through the ornate windows of the bridal suite, casting golden patterns across what remained of my wedding dress. Delicate beadwork lay scattered like fallen stars across the plush carpet. Yards of Italian silk and French lace, hand-selected during a special trip to New York with my late mother, hung in tatters from the vintage mannequin. I stood frozen, unable to process the devastation before me. Less than 12 hours remained until I was supposed to walk down the aisle to marry James, the love of my life, and unfortunately, the son of Victoria Harrington, the woman whose empty champagne glass now lay on its side near the destroyed gown. "Olivia, are you ready for hair and makeup?" My best friend and maid of honor, Rebecca, called from the hallway. "The stylist is setting up and—" Her voice died as she entered the room, eyes widening at the scene. "Oh my God, what happened?" "Victoria happened," I whispered, finally finding my voice. The shock was giving way to something else, a cold, clarifying anger that sliced through my initial disbelief. "She was here when I went down for breakfast, said she wanted to see the dress one more time before the ceremony." Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. "Are you sure it was her? Maybe it was an accident, or—" The room smelled like her perfume, that custom Chanel she always brags about. And this— I held up a monogrammed handkerchief with the distinctive VH embroidered in the corner, spotted with the same red wine that now stained what remained of my bodice. "This isn't something that happens by accident, Becca." Married into the Harrington family for 30 years, Victoria had crafted a perfect image as Charleston's premier socialite. Her charity galas were legendary, her garden parties exclusive, her opinion on everything from table settings to business acquisitions treated as gospel by the city's elite. From the moment James had introduced me, a self-taught dressmaker from the wrong side of the Savannah River with more ambition than pedigree, Victoria had made her disapproval abundantly clear. "She's just looking out for James," he would say, after each cutting remark or backhanded compliment. "Mom comes from a different generation. Give her time." I had given her 3 years. 3 years of perfectly polite smiles masking thinly veiled insults. 3 years of declined invitations to my studio showings. 3 years of suggestions that perhaps I could find something more suitable than designing custom gowns for clients who couldn't afford Carolina Herrera or Vera Wang. Now, staring at the ruins of the dress I'd spent 6 months creating, incorporating lace from my mother's own gown and tiny pearls my grandmother had saved from her wedding veil, I realized time had only sharpened Victoria's determination to prevent my entry into the Harrington family. Rebecca was already on her phone. "We need to tell James. This is beyond—" "No." The word came out more forcefully than I intended, surprising us both. "Not yet. Liv, your wedding is in 10 hours. Your dress is destroyed. This isn't something you can hide." "I'm not going to hide it," I said, a plan already forming. "But I need to handle this my way." What Victoria didn't know, what almost no one except Rebecca knew, was that I never worked on just one design. Every commission, every personal project, every important creation had always been accompanied by alternatives. My mother had taught me this after a client had changed her mind the day before a major society event, leaving us scrambling to create something new overnight. "Always have a backup," she'd said, stitching by lamplight while I handed her pins. "Not because you don't believe in your first choice, but because true professionals are prepared for anything." In the back of my closet at home, carefully wrapped, In acid-free tissue and sealed in a garment bag was another wedding dress. Not a copy of the ruined creation. Victoria would have expected that, but something entirely different. Where the original had been traditional with modern elements, a gown designed to please both Victoria's conservative sensibilities and my contemporary aesthetic, the second dress was purely, unapologetically me. "I need you to get me home without anyone seeing us leave," I told Rebecca, already gathering the destroyed dress and placing it carefully in its garment bag. "And then I need you to keep everyone busy while I make a few calls." "What are you planning?" Rebecca asked, concern and curiosity battling in her expression. "First, I'm going to save my wedding day," I said, surprising myself with the steady determination in my voice. "And then I'm going to make sure Victoria Harrington never underestimates me again." The drive to my small house on the outskirts of Charleston's historic district passed in tense silence. Rebecca navigated morning traffic while I made calls, first to my assistant Rachel at the studio, then to Elijah, a photographer friend who owed me a favor, and finally to Mrs. Chen, the owner of the local alterations shop who had taught me advanced beadwork techniques when I was just starting out. "Are you going to tell me what's happening?" Rebecca asked as we pulled into my driveway, carefully checking to ensure none of the wedding guests staying nearby were around. "I'm executing Plan B," I said, leading her through the side entrance directly to my workroom, and documenting everything. The backup dress emerged from its protective cocoon, catching the light in ways that made Rebecca gasp. Where the destroyed gown had been a classic A-line silhouette in traditional ivory, this creation was a daring mermaid cut in pale blush silk with an overlay of handmade French lace. The bodice featured a deeper neckline than Victoria would have approved, with intricate beadwork creating delicate patterns that told our love story in a visual language only James and I would fully understand. "This is Liv. This is extraordinary," Rebecca whispered, reaching out to touch the hand-sewn crystals that caught the light like morning dew. "When did you make this?" "I started it the week after he proposed," I admitted. Every time Victoria made a suggestion about the main dress that I accepted to keep the peace, I added something bold to this one. It was my rebellion, I guess. My private reminder that I wasn't losing myself completely in the Harrington world. Elijah arrived 20 minutes later, professional camera equipment in tow. Without asking questions, he began documenting the destroyed dress from every angle, capturing close-ups of the precision cuts that could only have been made deliberately, the wine stains strategically placed to ruin the most intricate beadwork. "Make sure you get the handkerchief," I instructed, pointing to Victoria's monogrammed calling card. "And I need you to timestamp everything." Mrs. Chen arrived next, her tiny frame belying the authority in her movements as she immediately began examining the backup dress for any necessary last-minute adjustments. "The bustle needs 30 minutes, she declared after a thorough inspection, "and I will reinforce the beading on the train. Too important to risk even one crystal falling." She fixed me with a stern look that softened into something like pride. "This dress, this is your heart, yes? Not the other one." I nodded, unexpectedly moved by her perception. "The other one was a compromise." "No more compromise," she said firmly, already threading her needle. "Today you become wife, but also remain Olivia." While Mrs. Chen worked her magic and Elijah continued documenting everything, I sat at my design table and wrote 2 letters. The first was to James, explaining exactly what had happened and including Elijah's contact information where he could view the photographs. The second was to Victoria, shorter, precise, and containing a promise rather than an accusation. When Rebecca returned from retrieving my emergency styling kit from the studio, she found me surprisingly calm, helping Mrs. Chen with the final touches on the bustle. "Shouldn't you be more, upset?" she asked cautiously. "Your monster-in-law just destroyed your wedding dress. You're allowed to fall apart a little." I secured the last hidden button before answering. I did design during my parents' final months in hospice, Bex. I learned that falling apart is a luxury you can only afford when the crisis is over. I straightened up, surveying our progress. Right now, I need to get married. The falling apart can wait until after the honeymoon. And what about Victoria? Are you going to confront her before the ceremony? I carefully placed the repaired dress in a new garment bag, considering my answer. No, today isn't about Victoria. It's about James and me. But make no mistake, I added, meeting my friend's concerned gaze. This isn't over. What Victoria did wasn't just an attack on a dress. It was a declaration that she doesn't respect me or what I create. And that's something I won't forget or forgive easily. The return to the hotel was executed with military precision. Mrs. Chen and Rachel created a diversion at the main entrance while Rebecca and I slipped in through the service door, the precious dress protected between us. By the time we reached the bridal suite, the hair and makeup team was waiting anxiously, having been told only that there had been a slight change of plans. The red wine was my fault, Rebecca announced loudly as we entered, sticking to our agreed-upon cover story. Total disaster with the original dress, but thankfully Olivia had a backup design. The stylists exchanged skeptical glances, but asked no questions, professionally adapting their plans to complement the new gown. As they worked, I maintained a serene exterior that belied the emotional turbulence beneath. Part of me wanted to cancel the whole wedding, to demand an accounting from Victoria immediately. Another part recognized that such a reaction would only confirm her belief that I wasn't Harrington material, too emotional, too unpolished to join their ranks. You know she's going to be shocked when she sees this dress, Rebecca murmured, as she helped me into the blush silk creation, now perfectly altered to fit like a second skin. It's nothing like what she's expecting. Good, I replied, watching my transformation in the mirror as the stylist secured my grandmother's antique hair combs into an elegant updo. Victoria has spent 3 years thinking she knows exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. It's time she learned otherwise. An hour before the ceremony, a soft knock at the door heralded James's arrival. Breaking tradition, he had insisted on seeing me before our walk down the aisle, a private moment before we became the center of 200 guests' attention. He can't see the dress, Rebecca protested half-heartedly, knowing we had agreed to this moment weeks ago. It's a different dress anyway, I reminded her with a small smile. And I need to see him. When James entered, his expression transformed from nervous anticipation to awestruck wonder. Liv, he breathed, taking in the blush silk, the intricate beading the way the dress seemed to have been born from my very skin. I've never seen anything so beautiful. For a moment, everything else faded away. Victoria's sabotage, the stress of the morning, the uncertain confrontation still to come. There was only James, looking at me the way he had the first time we met at his friend's gallery opening, where my fashion illustrations were being featured alongside established artists. You like it? I asked, suddenly shy. It's not the dress you saw in the sketches. It's better, he said immediately, taking my hands. This looks like you. Like your work, your vision. He shook his head in amazement. The other dress was gorgeous, but this is extraordinary, Liv. I hesitated, the letter I'd written burning a hole in Rebecca's purse where I'd asked her to keep it until after the ceremony. Looking at James now, his sincerity radiating from every feature, I made a split-second decision. There's something you need to know before we get married, I said quietly, nodding to Rebecca, who reluctantly retrieved the sealed envelope. Something about your mother. His expression clouded. What happened? Did she say something to you? Not exactly. I handed him the letter. She did something. And before you read this, I want you to know that I've handled it, and today is still about us. But I won't start our marriage with secrets, even ones meant to protect you. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. James read in silence, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally a cold anger I'd never seen before. When he finished, he looked up, his jaw tight. Where is she now? Probably in the front row, waiting. To see me walk down the aisle in the traditional dress she approved, the one she destroyed this morning, I said, keeping my voice steady. James, I don't want a confrontation right now. That's not why I told you. Then why did you? He asked, genuinely curious, despite the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Because I needed you to know who I'm marrying, I said simply. Not just you, but the family dynamics I'm walking into. I need you to understand that while I'm prepared to be respectful to your mother as your parent, I will never again allow her to dismiss me or my work. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition perhaps of the steel beneath my usual accommodating exterior. My mother has spent my entire life believing she knows what's best for everyone, he said finally. And most people, including me, have let her manipulate situations rather than confront her directly. He took my hands again, his grip firmer. Now. But that ends today. I'll handle this after the ceremony. We'll handle it, I corrected gently. Together. But first, we get married. Deal? His smile returned, warmth replacing anger. Deal. As the wedding march began, and I prepared to walk down the aisle on the arm of James's own father, another detail Victoria had arranged, given my parents' absence, I caught her eye from the back of the church. The shock that registered on her perfectly composed face at the sight of me in a completely different dress than the one she had destroyed, a dress more beautiful, more distinctive, more undeniably mine, provided the first moment of pure satisfaction in what had been a tumultuous day. But it was the flicker of something else, a brief flash of uncertainty, perhaps even fear, that told me Victoria Harrington was finally beginning to understand that the young woman she had dismissed as an easy obstacle had resources and resilience she hadn't anticipated. As I joined James at the altar, resplendent in his morning suit with eyes only for me, I smiled with genuine joy. Victoria's sabotage had failed to derail our wedding day. What she didn't realize yet was that it had also set in motion a chain of events that would permanently alter the power dynamic she had maintained for 3 decades. The seeds of my response were already planted, in the documented evidence of her destruction, in the blush silk creation now causing whispers of admiration throughout the church, and in the quiet determination that had carried me through the morning's crisis. Victoria had tried to destroy what I had created, believing it would break me. Instead, she was about to discover exactly who she was dealing with, and it wasn't the accommodating young woman she thought she knew. As I exchanged vows with the man I loved, I silently added one more promise to myself. Victoria Harrington would never underestimate me again. The reception at Charleston Harbor Resort unfolded like a beautiful dream despite the morning's chaos. Fairy lights transformed the waterfront pavilion into an enchanted garden, with white hydrangeas and blush roses creating an atmosphere of elegant romance. A string quartet played softly as guests mingled during cocktail hour, many of them approaching me with compliments about my unexpected gown. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered Mrs. Ellison, a longtime friend of the Harrington family and notable Charleston socialite. "Did you really design this yourself? It's extraordinary." "She designs all her own creations," James answered, proudly before I could respond, his hand resting supportively at the small of my back. "Olivia's work is gaining quite a following throughout the Southeast." Mrs. Ellison's eyebrows lifted with new interest. "Is that so? My daughter Caroline is getting married next spring. Perhaps we should talk." This scene repeated itself throughout. The evening, society women who had previously acknowledged me with cool politeness now approached with genuine curiosity about my designs. Each conversation represented potential clients, connections that Victoria had subtly blocked for years through carefully placed comments about my charming little hobby and suggestions toward more established designers. Victoria herself remained conspicuously removed from these interactions, maintaining court at her table with her closest allies. Her Chanel suit, custom-made in a shade of blue that complemented the original wedding color scheme, now clashed subtly with the blush accents I had incorporated after the morning's change of plans. It was a small detail, but one I noted with private satisfaction. "She keeps staring at you," Rebecca murmured as we stood near the cake display, "like she can't quite figure out what happened." "She knows exactly what happened," I replied quietly. "What she can't figure out is how I recovered so completely." The weight of James's father's crystal champagne flute felt substantial in my hand as I watched Victoria's calculating gaze move between my dress and her son. Throughout the day, I had maintained perfect composure. The gracious bride, the delighted new daughter-in-law, the talented designer receiving well-deserved recognition. Not once had I allowed so much as a flicker of the morning's trauma to show on my face. "Have you told James's father?" Rebecca asked, nodding toward Henry Harrington, who was jovially entertaining guests near the bar. In his mid-60s, Henry possessed the robust charm and booming laugh that had made him a successful shipping executive and beloved community figure, the perfect counterbalance to Victoria's icy precision. "Not yet," I said. "James wants to handle that conversation privately after the honeymoon." The decision to delay confrontation had been a strategic one. Victoria expected an immediate reaction: tears, accusations, a ruined wedding day that would confirm her assessment of me as emotionally unstable and unsuitable for her son. By proceeding with the celebration as if nothing had happened, we had denied her the satisfaction of that outcome. Dinner service commenced with a series of heartfelt toasts. Rebecca spoke eloquently about our friendship since design school days, bringing tears to many eyes with stories of late-night sewing marathons and my determination to succeed despite numerous obstacles. James's best friend Marcus reminisced about introducing us at the gallery exhibition, claiming credit for the match with good-natured humor. When Henry rose for the traditional father of the groom speech, I felt James tense slightly beside me. "I've watched my son grow into an exceptional man," Henry began, his voice carrying easily across the pavilion. "A man who recognizes quality and beauty when he sees it." His gaze moved warmly to me. "Olivia, your talent is matched only by your grace under pressure. That dress," he gestured appreciatively toward my creation, "is a testament to both. The Harrington family is immeasurably enriched by your presence." Victoria's smile remained fixed throughout her husband's speech, but I noticed her knuckles whitening around her champagne flute. Henry's specific compliment about grace under pressure made me wonder if he somehow knew more than he was letting on. The evening continued with our first dance, a choreographed waltz to Cole Porter's "You're the Top" that drew appreciative applause. As James guided me across the floor, I caught glimpses of Victoria's face, her expression increasingly troubled, as she observed the admiration directed toward us from all quarters. "You're remarkable," James whispered against my ear as he executed a perfect turn. "I don't know many people who could go through what you did this morning and still create this magical evening." "I had excellent motivation," I replied, smiling up at him, "and a very good partner." When the father-daughter dance was announced, a tradition I had decided to keep despite my parents' absence, Henry stepped forward. "With your permission," he said formally, extending his hand to me. "I would be honored." Dancing with my new father-in-law while Victoria watched from the sidelines created a complex emotional tableau. Henry's kindness had always seemed genuine, his welcome warm where his wife's had been arctic. As he guided me smoothly around the floor to Nat King Cole's Unforgettable, I wondered how much he suspected about the true dynamics of his household. "That dress really is extraordinary, Olivia," he said as we moved through the steps. "Victoria mentioned you had designed something completely different." I maintained my composure, meeting his gaze steadily. Plans sometimes change unexpectedly. Fortunately, I believe in being prepared. A subtle knowing flickered in his eyes, a philosophy I've always found invaluable in business and in life. He glanced briefly toward his wife before returning his attention to me. "The Harrington women have traditionally been formidable in their own right. I suspect you'll uphold that legacy admirably, albeit in your own distinctive style." "I intend to," I replied, the simple statement carrying weight beyond the dance floor conversation. Henry nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. James has never been happier, and that's what matters most to me." As the evening progressed toward its conclusion, James and I made our rounds, thanking guests and accepting congratulations. When we finally reached Victoria's table, she rose with practiced elegance, embracing James warmly before turning to me. "Olivia, dear," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume to be heard by those nearby. "What a lovely surprise your dress turned out to be, so different from what you had described." "Sometimes inspiration strikes unexpectedly," I replied evenly. "As a patron of the arts, I'm sure you understand how creative vision can evolve." "Indeed." Her smile remained fixed as she leaned forward to air-kiss my cheek, whispering for my ears only, "Impressive recovery. Perhaps you have more resources than I anticipated." I returned the gesture, my own whisper equally measured. "You have no idea." That brief exchange confirmed what I had suspected. Victoria had expected her actions to derail the wedding entirely, or at minimum to leave me vulnerable and humiliated. My composed response and the apparent ease with which I had produced an even more spectacular gown had caught her off guard. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and celebration. At midnight, James and I departed, amid a shower of rose petals, heading for the luxurious suite at Charleston's historic Bellman Hotel, where we would spend our wedding night before departing for our honeymoon in Santorini the following afternoon. Once alone in our suite, the facade of perfect composure I had maintained throughout the day finally cracked. As James loosened his tie and poured us each a glass of champagne, I sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the emotional whiplash of the past 18 hours. "I can't believe we pulled that off," I said, my voice catching as the adrenaline that had carried me through the day began to ebb. "For a few hours this morning, I thought everything was ruined." James set down the champagne and knelt before me, taking my hands in his. "But it wasn't. You transformed disaster into triumph in a way only you could have." His expression grew serious. "I'm so sorry about what my mother did, Liv. There's no excuse for it." "Why do you think she did it?" I asked, finally voicing the question that had lingered beneath the surface all day. "What did she hope to accomplish?" James sighed, moving to sit beside me on the bed. "Control. It's always been about control with her. She spent 30 years orchestrating the Harrington family image, and you represent something she can't manage or direct." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You're talented in your own right, independent in your thinking, and worst of all, I love you completely without her influence." "That can't be enough reason to destroy a wedding dress," I protested. "There has to be more." "I think she honestly believed you would call off the wedding," James admitted, "or that I would see you overreact and have second thoughts. Either way, she would win." The realization settled heavily between us. Victoria hadn't just attacked a dress. She had attempted to sever our relationship entirely through a calculated act of sabotage. "What happens now?" I asked, leaning into his shoulder. "After the honeymoon, when we have to face her again?" "Now we establish boundaries," James said firmly. "Together. I've let her behavior slide for too long because it was easier than confrontation. That ends today. He tilted my chin up gently. But tonight is about us. Not my mother, not the dress disaster, just you and me beginning our life together. He was right, of course. We had weathered Victoria's attempt to derail our wedding day, emerging stronger for having faced it as a united front. The rest could wait until after our honeymoon. The next 2 weeks in Santorini proved to be exactly the respite we needed. Nestled in a private villa overlooking the caldera, we spent our days exploring ancient ruins, sampling local cuisine, and simply enjoying each other's company away from Charleston society and family expectations. I sketched constantly, inspired by the stark white architecture against brilliant blue skies, the volcanic landscapes, and the quality of Mediterranean light so different from the golden haze of the South Carolina Lowcountry. You should incorporate these elements into your next collection, James suggested one evening as he reviewed my sketchbook. These silhouettes are incredible. I've been thinking about that, I admitted, watching the sunset paint the whitewashed walls of our villa in shades of pink and gold. The studio space I've been renting is too small for what I want to do next. I think it's time to expand. Into a full boutique? James asked, immediately supportive. You've talked about that possibility before. Not just a boutique, I said, allowing myself to articulate the vision that had been forming since our wedding day. A complete atelier, design studio, consultation, space, and boutique showroom. Somewhere brides can come for the full custom experience, from concept to creation. The idea had been gestating for years, but had crystallized in the aftermath of Victoria's sabotage. Something about that crisis, and my response to it, had clarified my professional direction and strengthened my resolve. If I could create a backup wedding dress that surpassed expectations under extreme circumstances, what might I accomplish with proper resources and preparation? That sounds perfect, James said, his enthusiasm genuine. Have you thought about locations? Actually, yes. There's a historic building on King Street that's been vacant for months. It needs renovation, but the bones are excellent, and the location is ideal. Near the established luxury retailers, but not directly in the tourist zone. James's grin widened. You've already scouted it, haven't you? Maybe, I admitted with a smile. Rebecca took photos and measurements for me before the wedding. I've been playing with layout designs during our afternoon breaks. Always prepared, he noted with admiration. That's my wife. The phrase, my wife, still sent a pleasant shiver through me. A reminder that despite Victoria's interference, we had emerged victorious. Now, as we planned our return to Charleston, I found myself eager rather than anxious about the future. The confrontation with Victoria still loomed, but it no longer dominated my thoughts. Instead, I focused on the positive steps ahead, establishing our new home together, expanding my business, and creating the life we wanted rather than the one Victoria had envisioned for her son. Our return to Charleston brought an unexpected development. The society column of the local newspaper featured a prominent spread about our wedding, including a stunning photograph of me in the blush silk gown. The accompanying article specifically mentioned the rising star designer who created her own show-stopping wedding dress, along with quotes from several attendees praising the innovative approach to bridal fashion. Did you arrange this? I asked James over breakfast at our newly purchased townhouse in the historic district, the newspaper spread between us. Not directly, he admitted, though I may have mentioned to Caroline Woodward's mother that you're considering opening an atelier soon. Mrs. Woodward sits on the paper's editorial board. Clever man, I said, genuinely impressed by his strategic thinking. Victoria must be furious. Probably, he agreed without remorse. But it's time the city recognized your talent on its own merits, without her filtering the narrative. The article generated immediate interest. By week's end, I had received calls from 3 society brides requesting consultations and an invitation to showcase pieces at an upcoming charity fashion event. The same event where Victoria had conspicuously excluded my work the previous year despite James's suggestions. "We should invite your parents to dinner," I said that evening as we unpacked wedding gifts in our new dining room. "It's time to clear the air about what happened." James nodded, setting down a crystal vase from his father's sister. "I spoke with Dad yesterday. He's free tomorrow night. Mom claimed to have a prior commitment, but he's insisting she reschedule." "She's avoiding the confrontation," I noted, unsurprised. "Classic Victoria." "Not this time," James said firmly. Dad was quite clear about her attendance being non-negotiable. Henry's insistence proved effective. At precisely 7 o'clock the following evening, the elder Harringtons arrived at our townhouse. Victoria appeared impeccable as always in a tailored Armani pantsuit, her expression pleasantly neutral as she handed over a bottle of champagne. "What a charming home," she commented, her gaze sweeping critically over our eclectic decor, a blend of James's modernist preferences and my vintage finds. "So creative." "Thank you," I replied evenly, accepting the champagne. "We're quite happy with it." Dinner began with careful small talk, discussions of Santorini's beauty, updates on family friends, observations about Charleston's unusually mild autumn. Henry carried much of the conversation, his natural bonhomie creating a facade of normalcy over the simmering tension. It wasn't until dessert that James finally broached the subject we had gathered to address. "Mom, Dad," he began, his voice steady as he reached for my hand under the table. "There's something we need to discuss about our wedding day." Victoria's spoon paused halfway to her creme brulee. "Oh? Was there a problem with the catering? I thought everything went beautifully." "Not the catering," James said. "The wedding dress. Or more specifically, what happened to Olivia's original dress the morning of the ceremony." Victoria's expression remained carefully composed, though I noticed a slight tightening around her eyes. "I'm not sure I understand." Rather than responding verbally, James nodded to me. I rose and retrieved a large envelope from my studio, returning to place it on the table between us. Inside were Elijah's photographs, crisp, professionally lit images documenting the destroyed dress from every angle, including close-ups of the precision cuts, wine stains, and most damning of all, Victoria's monogrammed handkerchief among the ruins. Henry picked up the photographs first, his expression darkening as he moved through the stack. "What exactly am I looking at here?" "Olivia's original wedding dress," James answered, "after someone deliberately destroyed it the morning of our wedding." Victoria's face had gone very still, a porcelain mask revealing nothing as Henry turned to her, disbelief etched across his features. "Victoria?" he prompted, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer but needed to hear it from her. "This is absurd," she finally said, pushing away from the table slightly. "Why would I do such a thing?" "That's exactly what we'd like to know," James replied, his voice remaining calm despite the tension vibrating through him. "The evidence is quite clear, Mother. Your handkerchief was found at the scene. The hotel's security footage shows you entering and leaving the bridal suite during the exact time frame when the dress was destroyed. No one else had access." Victoria's gaze darted between her son and husband before settling on me, calculation evident behind her composed exterior. "If this alleged incident occurred, why didn't you say something at the wedding? Why wait until now?" "Because I refused to let your actions ruin our day," I answered honestly. "And because I was fortunate enough to have created a backup dress, one that, judging by the response it received, actually worked out better in the end." A flash of genuine surprise crossed Victoria's features before she could suppress it. "You made a second dress? Without telling anyone?" "I always create alternatives for important designs," I explained, allowing a hint of professional pride to color my tone. It's standard practice in my studio, something I learned from my mother. Always have contingency plans for the unexpected. Henry set the photographs down deliberately, his expression grave as he addressed his wife. Victoria, I need you to answer the question directly. Did you destroy Olivia's wedding dress? The silence stretched for several long seconds as Victoria appeared to calculate her options. Finally, recognizing the futility of further denial, her posture shifted subtly. I may have had a momentary lapse in judgment, she conceded, her tone suggesting a minor indiscretion rather than calculated sabotage. The stress of the wedding preparations, concerns about James's future. I simply felt the dress wasn't appropriate for a Harrington bride. So, you destroyed it? Henry's incredulity was evident. Rather than discussing your concerns? I didn't intend to destroy it entirely, Victoria amended, attempting to reframe the narrative. Perhaps I had too much champagne that morning. Things escalated. James shook his head, disappointment evident in every line of his face. That's not good enough, Mom. What you did was calculated and cruel. You tried to devastate Olivia on what should have been the happiest day of our lives. I was protecting you, Victoria insisted, abandoning pretense. This marriage is a mistake, James. She's not from our world. Her background, her profession, it's all wrong for someone with your prospects. I thought if the wedding was delayed, you might reconsider. The naked prejudice in her statement hung in the air between us. For 3 years, I had suspected these were Victoria's true feelings, but hearing them stated so baldly still stung. Before James could respond, Henry placed his napkin carefully on the table and fixed his wife with a steely gaze I had never witnessed from the typically jovial man. That's enough, Victoria, he said quietly. You've crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Henry, she began, but he raised a hand to silence her. No. I've tolerated your social manipulations and class pretensions for 30 years, but this goes beyond acceptable behavior by any measure. He turned to me, genuine remorse in his expression. Olivia, I cannot adequately express my shame and apology for what occurred. Please know that Victoria's actions represent her views alone, not the values of the entire Harrington family. His sincerity was unmistakable, as was the implicit message that there would be consequences within their marriage for Victoria's behavior. What happens now? Victoria asked, her composure slipping slightly as she recognized the unified front facing her. Now we establish clear boundaries, James stated firmly. Olivia and I are married. That isn't changing. She is my wife, and a talented designer whose career is flourishing on its merit. Your acceptance of these facts isn't required, but your respect for our marriage and Olivia's profession is non-negotiable. And if I find that difficult? Victoria challenged, a final attempt to assert control. Then you'll be seeing a lot less of us, James replied simply. Your choice. The remainder of the evening passed in strained conversation as we finished dessert and coffee. When the elder Harringtons finally departed, Henry apologized once more, promising a private conversation to discuss appropriate restitution for the damaged dress. As the door closed behind them, I leaned against James, both exhausted and oddly exhilarated by the confrontation. Do you think anything will change? With my mother? I don't know, he admitted. But something has definitely shifted with my father. I've never seen him stand up to her like that. The confrontation marked a turning point, though not in ways I might have predicted. Victoria didn't experience an overnight transformation into a supportive mother-in-law. Instead, she retreated into cool formality, maintaining appropriate appearances at necessary family functions while minimizing direct interaction. What did change, significantly, was my professional trajectory. With the boundaries clearly established and Victoria's interference neutralized, my business expanded rapidly. The King Street building was secured with a combination of my savings and a business loan Henry unexpectedly offered to co-sign. "Consider it partial amends," he said when he presented the paperwork. "Victoria's actions were unconscionable, but they revealed your extraordinary resilience and talent. Those qualities deserve investment." Within 6 months, Olivia Chen Designs opened its doors, a full-service bridal atelier specializing in custom gowns and evening wear. The space combined restored historic elements with modern design details, creating an atmosphere both luxurious and welcoming. A framed photograph of my blush wedding dress held pride of place in the consultation area, often serving as inspiration for brides seeking something beyond traditional offerings. "Your own wedding story is so inspiring," commented Caroline Woodward during her first fitting. "To have your original dress destroyed and still create something so magnificent under pressure, it gives me confidence that you can handle anything that might arise before my big day." I smiled, adjusting the drape of Italian silk across her shoulders. The best designs often emerge from unexpected challenges. Sometimes what appears to be disaster actually opens the door to something extraordinary. Those words, spoken casually during a client consultation, contained the essential truth I had discovered through Victoria's attempted sabotage. What she had intended as devastating destruction had instead catalyzed creation, not just of a more authentic wedding dress, but of a clearer vision for my business and a stronger foundation for my marriage. As my studio earned recognition throughout the Southeast, eventually attracting clients from across the country, Victoria maintained her distance, watching from the periphery as the daughter-in-law she had dismissed as unsuitable became Charleston's most sought-after designer. Her silence spoke volumes about her unchanged opinion, but it no longer held power over my peace of mind or professional progress. The ultimate irony emerged 6 months after our confrontation dinner, when Victoria's niece Julia announced her engagement and secretly scheduled a consultation at my atelier. "Please don't tell Aunt Victoria," Julia begged during our initial meeting. "She's suggested several designers from New York, but I've always loved your work. Your wedding dress was exactly the kind of unique statement piece I want for myself." The request represented perfect poetic justice, Victoria's own family now seeking my designs despite her ongoing disapproval. I considered refusing out of principle but recognized the opportunity for what it truly represented. Not revenge, but the natural consequence of authentic work finding its audience regardless of artificial barriers. "Your secret is safe with me," I assured Julia, already sketching concepts inspired by her personality and preferences. "And I promise you this, your dress will be unforgettable." As I began creating Julia's gown, incorporating elements that honored both tradition and individuality, I reflected on the complex journey that had brought me to this moment. Victoria's attempt to destroy what I had created had ultimately failed, not because I had a backup dress, but because she had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of creativity itself. True creation cannot be permanently destroyed. It simply transforms, finding new expression through the very challenges intended to defeat it. Victoria had tried to cut away my future with scissors and wine, never realizing that in doing so, she had merely pruned back growth to allow for stronger, more authentic development. When Julia's completed gown was finally revealed, an architectural marvel of handcrafted lace and structural silk that perfectly expressed her vibrant personality, her tearful reaction confirmed what I had learned through my own wedding experience. The most beautiful designs emerge not despite obstacles, but because of them. Victoria's sabotage had been intended as an ending. Instead, it had become the beginning of something far more significant than either of us could have imagined. Her scissors had cut away pretense and compromise, revealing the authentic creator I had sometimes hesitated to become. For that unexpected gift, I was almost grateful. Almost. The transformation of Olivia Chen Designs from a promising startup to Charleston's premier bridal atelier happened with a momentum that surprised even me. 1 year after our wedding, my King Street location had become a destination for brides throughout the Southeast who wanted something beyond the expected. My waiting list stretched to 6 months, forcing me to expand my team to include 2 assistant designers and a full-time seamstress. The irony wasn't lost on me that Victoria's attempt to derail my wedding had instead catapulted my business to new heights. The story of my backup dress had taken on almost mythical proportions in Charleston's social circles, embellished with each retelling until it sounded like I had whipped up a couture gown in mere hours while simultaneously arranging flowers and writing my vows. The truth is impressive enough, I reminded Rebecca one afternoon as we reviewed fabric swatches for the upcoming collection. I don't need the fairy tale version. People love the drama, she replied with a shrug, sorting silks by shade. The resilient designer who triumphs over sabotage makes for a better story than the prepared professional who had a contingency plan. She wasn't wrong. Clients often mentioned the wedding dress incident during consultations, some even admitting it was part of why they sought me out. Anyone who can create something that beautiful under that kind of pressure can certainly handle my mother's opinions about necklines, one bride had commented, only half joking. What these clients didn't realize was how that incident had fundamentally changed my approach to design. Before Victoria's interference, I had often compromised my creative vision to accommodate conventional expectations, just as I had with my original wedding dress. The success of my backup gown, bolder, more distinctive, unapologetically original, had proven that authenticity resonated more powerfully than safe choices. This philosophy now infused every aspect of my business. While I certainly listened to clients' wishes, I no longer diluted my creative perspective to make designs more marketable or traditional. The result was a collection of gowns that couldn't be mistaken for anyone else's work. Architectural bodices, unexpected color, treatments, innovative textile combinations that respected bridal traditions while pushing their boundaries. Ms. Chen? My assistant Rachel appeared in the studio doorway, interrupting my thoughts. The space next door just posted a for lease sign. I thought you'd want to know immediately. I set down the sketchbook I'd been reviewing. The neighboring storefront, a former antique shop that had closed 3 months earlier, would perfectly accommodate the expansion I'd been considering. The location directly adjacent to my existing space meant we could potentially connect the properties, creating a seamless operation rather than managing separate locations. Call the leasing agent, I instructed, already mentally reconfiguring floor plans. See if they'll meet me this afternoon. 2 hours later, I was walking through the empty storefront with Martin Reynolds, the property manager for several historic buildings in Charleston's luxury retail district. The timing is fortunate, he remarked as I measured the distance between structural columns. We've had several interested parties, but none that felt quite right for the neighborhood. And what makes me right for the neighborhood? I asked, testing the solidity of the original heart pine flooring. You're creating something here, he replied thoughtfully. Not just selling products. King Street needs businesses with vision, especially in this economy. The post-pandemic retail landscape had indeed been challenging for Charleston's historic shopping district. Several long-time establishments had closed, unable to navigate the changing market. Even Victoria's favorite boutiques had struggled, though she would never admit it at her carefully curated charity luncheons. I'd use this space for production and a proper atelier, I explained, gesturing to indicate different areas. Move the consultation rooms here, expand the showroom in the original space. The structural wall between properties would need modification for flow. Historic Preservation Board would need to approve any structural changes, Martin cautioned. But given your track record with the current space's renovation, I don't anticipate major obstacles. We discussed terms, the conversation flowing easily toward agreement. As we shook hands on the preliminary arrangement, Martin hesitated momentarily. I should mention, Victoria Harrington called when the space became available. She suggested a French linen boutique she patronizes in Savannah might be interested. The information wasn't surprising. Victoria's influence in Charleston's business community remained substantial despite our personal estrangement. But the fact that Martin mentioned it caught my attention. "And yet you're leasing to me instead," I observed. He smiled slightly. "Mrs. Harrington has many fine qualities, but sometimes her vision of Charleston looks backward rather than forward. Your business brings fresh energy while respecting the city's character. That's the direction property owners on King Street want to encourage." The subtle shift in power dynamics wasn't lost on me. Victoria had spent decades cultivating relationships throughout Charleston society, positioning herself as an arbiter of taste and propriety. Now, those same connections were beginning to recognize that her narrow vision no longer aligned with the city's evolving identity. The expansion plans proceeded rapidly after that initial conversation. Architectural drawings were commissioned, permits filed, and construction bids solicited. James provided invaluable support, leveraging his connections in commercial real estate to navigate regulatory hurdles that might have otherwise delayed the project. "The Preservation Board unanimously approved the connecting archway design," he announced one evening, joining me on our townhouse balcony where I was sketching by the last light of sunset. "Construction can begin next month." That was faster than expected, I noted, pleased but surprised. The Charleston Historic Preservation Board was notoriously meticulous, often requiring multiple proposal revisions before approving modifications to buildings in the historic district. Apparently, several board members have daughters who are either clients or hoping to become clients, James replied with a smile. "Amazing how that improves bureaucratic efficiency." I set aside my sketchbook, taking the glass of wine he offered. Victoria must be livid. First, her niece commissions her wedding gown from me. Now her preservation board connections are expediting my expansion. "She's definitely noticed," James confirmed. "Dad mentioned she's been unusually quiet at their social engagements lately, just watching and listening instead of directing conversations." "That sounds almost ominous," I said, only half joking. James shook his head. "I think it's adjustment, not plotting. She's realizing her influence isn't absolute anymore. Whether adjustment or strategic retreat, Victoria's subdued behavior coincided with a period of tremendous growth for my business. As construction began on the expansion, national recognition followed a feature in Vogue highlighting innovative bridal designers outside New York and Los Angeles. The article, which prominently mentioned Chen's remarkable ability to balance architectural precision with romantic fluidity, brought inquiries from brides across the country. "We need to consider hiring another senior designer," Rebecca advised as we reviewed the growing waiting list. "You can't personally design every commission anymore, not at this volume." The suggestion made practical sense, but triggered an unexpected wave of anxiety. My designs were intensely personal, each one reflecting both my aesthetic and my relationship with the client. The thought of delegating that creative process felt like potentially compromising the very qualities that had built my reputation. "What if we structure it differently?" I suggested after consideration. "I remain primary designer but bring in specialized associates, someone focusing on beadwork, another on structural elements, a third on textiles. They execute components under my direction rather than creating entire designs independently." This approach, an atelier model more common in European fashion houses than American boutiques, would maintain design consistency while expanding capacity. It would also create a unique training ground for emerging talent, allowing specialized artisans to develop their skills within a cohesive creative framework. "That could work," Rebecca agreed, warming to the concept. "We'd need to be selective about who we bring in. Find people who understand they're contributing to your vision rather than expressing their own. And who might eventually develop into full designers within the house style," I added, envisioning a future where Olivia Chen designs could outlast my personal involvement. Creating a true design house rather than just a successful solo business. This evolution represented a significant shift from my original ambitions. I had entered the industry focused on establishing my individual reputation, proving my talent to those who had doubted or dismissed me. Now, I found myself increasingly drawn to legacy building, creating an institution that could nurture talent and influence bridal fashion beyond my personal contribution. As construction progressed on the expansion, I devoted considerable energy to refining this atelier concept. Detailed process documents were developed, clarifying how designs would flow from initial concept through specialized execution to final production. Training protocols were established to ensure consistency across team members. Financial projections were carefully calculated to determine appropriate compensation structures. James watched this meticulous planning with admiration and occasional concern. "You're working 16-hour days," he observed one night when I finally crawled into bed well after midnight. "The business is thriving, but I'm worried about you." "It's temporary," I assured him, though we both knew my tendency toward perfectionism made such promises questionable. Once the systems are established and the right team is in place, things will normalize. "That's what every entrepreneur says right before burnout hits," he pointed out gently. "Your mother-in-law couldn't destroy your wedding, but don't let proving her wrong destroy your health." The comment struck deeper than he likely intended. Was I still, on some level, driven by the need to prove Victoria wrong? Had my legitimate business expansion become entangled with lingering resentment over her attempted sabotage? These questions lingered as I interviewed potential team members for the expanding atelier. Each candidate was evaluated not just for technical skill, but for temperament and collaborative ability. Creating the right culture within the studio would be crucial for the model to function effectively. Among the final selections, 2 choices particularly satisfied me. Rachel, who had started as my administrative assistant, had revealed remarkable talent for technical pattern development and would now head that department. And Julia Porter, a recent fashion graduate with extraordinary beadwork skills, would manage the embellishment team. Julia's appointment held special significance beyond her impressive portfolio. As a woman from modest beginnings with formidable talent but limited connections, she reminded me of myself before marriage had attached the Harrington name to my identity. Providing the opportunity I had once sought felt like completing an important circle. The expanded atelier opened with appropriate ceremony 4 months later. The connecting archway between buildings, a structural marvel that preserved historic elements while creating visual continuity, drew particular praise from architectural preservationists. The production space featured custom workstations designed specifically for specialized tasks, while the enlarged consultation area offered private rooms where brides could share their vision in comfort. The opening event attracted considerable attention, with Charleston society figures, fashion journalists, and industry professionals filling the space to capacity. Henry Harrington attended, his genuine pride evident as he toured the facilities. Victoria, predictably, cited a prior commitment. "This is extraordinary, Olivia," Henry commented as he examined the intricate structural details of a gown on display. "You've created something truly significant here." "Thank you," I replied, touched by his sincere admiration. Our relationship had improved considerably since the confrontation dinner, evolving into mutual respect, uncomplicated by Victoria's influence. "It's been quite a journey from that first studio space." "Indeed." He glanced around at the crowded showroom. "And quite a response from the community." That response extended well beyond the opening celebration. Features in regional business publications highlighted the atelier's innovative approach to production and training. The Charleston Chamber of Commerce recognized the business with its annual Entrepreneurship Award. Most significantly, applications flooded in from talented artisans eager to join what was quickly becoming recognized as a prestigious training ground. 6 months after the expansion, with the new systems functioning smoothly and the team working cohesively, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge a simple truth. We had not just succeeded, but exceeded every measure of success I had originally envisioned. This realization arrived unexpectedly during a routine client consultation. Seated in one of the elegantly appointed meeting rooms, reviewing concept sketches with a bride and her mother, I suddenly noticed the transformation in my own approach. Where I had once been anxious about client reactions, desperately seeking approval, I now presented ideas with confident authority. The energy had shifted. Clients now sought my creative direction rather than me seeking their validation. "What made you decide to become a designer?" the mother asked during a break. "In our discussion of fabric options, you seem to have such clarity about your aesthetic." The question prompted reflection I hadn't permitted myself during the whirlwind of expansion. "I always loved creating," I answered, considering my words carefully. "But I think what truly shaped my approach was learning to trust my own vision, even when others couldn't see it yet." Later that evening, walking through the quiet atelier after everyone had gone, I allowed my thoughts to return to the wedding dress incident that had inadvertently launched this remarkable growth. Victoria's attempt to destroy my creation had instead clarified something essential: the difference between seeking approval and offering vision. Had I worn the original dress, the compromise gown designed to placate traditional expectations, I might never have recognized the power of authentic creative expression. That weekend, I mentioned this revelation to James as we enjoyed a rare day away from responsibilities, walking along the Battery as sailboats glided across Charleston Harbor. "It's not that I'm grateful for what she did," I clarified, watching seabirds wheel against the clear autumn sky. "But I've been thinking about how that crisis forced me to present my unfiltered design perspective on our wedding day. The response to that dress gave me confidence I might have taken years to develop otherwise." James considered this thoughtfully. "Crisis as catalyst," he observed. "You needed to lose the safety net of compromise to discover how powerfully your authentic vision could resonate." "Exactly." I squeezed his hand, appreciative of his understanding. "I think I was always afraid that being fully myself, in design and in life, would mean rejection. Your mother's actions inadvertently proved the opposite." This perspective provided unexpected liberation. The lingering resentment toward Victoria, which I had carried even while building my success, began to dissolve, replaced by something closer to detached appreciation for the inadvertent role she had played in my development. The emotional energy previously invested in proving her wrong could now be redirected toward more constructive purposes. This shift manifested in a decision I had been contemplating for months: establishing a scholarship program for young designers from underrepresented backgrounds. The proposed initiative would provide not just financial support for fashion education, but mentorship and internship opportunities within the atelier. "I want to create the support system I wished for when I was starting out," I explained to James as I finalized the program structure. "Technical training matters, but so does having someone believe in your vision before the rest of the world catches up." The Olivia Chen Design Scholarship was announced at a charity event benefiting arts education, an event, ironically, that Victoria had chaired for the past decade. Though she hadn't personally invited me to participate, the organizing committee had specifically requested our involvement, another sign of changing influence within Charleston society. Standing at the podium, describing the scholarship opportunities to an audience that included many who had once followed Victoria's lead in dismissing my work, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with shredded silk and scattered beads had culminated in creating opportunities for others to pursue their creative vision without the obstacles I had faced. "Success comes in many forms," I concluded, scanning the attentive faces. "But its most meaningful expression is the ability to open doors for those who come after you." From my peripheral vision, I noticed Victoria seated at her designated table, her expression carefully neutral as applause followed my announcement. Our eyes met briefly across the ballroom, not in challenge or triumph, but in simple acknowledgement of a changed reality. Later that evening, as guests mingled during the reception portion of the event, Victoria approached me directly for the first time in months. James tensed slightly beside me, protective instincts activated by her proximity. "The scholarship program is commendable," she said without preamble, her tone formal but not hostile. "Particularly the mentorship component." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely surprised by the comment. "I believe guidance is often as valuable as financial support." She nodded once precisely. "Indeed, talent requires direction to reach its potential." A slight pause followed as she seemed to consider her next words carefully. "Your direction has proven more effective than I anticipated." The statement, the closest thing to an acknowledgement of my success she had ever offered, hung between us momentarily before she continued. "Julia has asked me to accompany her to her final fitting next week. Would that be acceptable?" The request represented a significant concession. Victoria was not asking to influence her niece's gown design, but requesting permission to enter the space I had created, tacit recognition of changed power dynamics. "Of course," I replied simply. "We'll expect you both at 3 on Wednesday." With another precise nod, she moved away to greet other guests, leaving James and me to exchange surprised glances. "That was almost civil," he observed quietly. "Almost," I agreed. "I think she's finally accepting that disapproval hasn't diminished my success and might actually be isolating her instead." The fitting with Julia and Victoria proceeded with professional courtesy the following week. Victoria remained largely silent as her niece tried on the nearly completed gown, a modern interpretation of classical proportions with innovative structural elements that complemented the bride's athletic frame. "The construction is quite impressive," Victoria finally commented, examining the interior details with knowledgeable appreciation. "I haven't seen this technique used in bridal before." "It's adapted from historical couture methods," I explained, pointing out specific elements. "We've modified it to support the weight of the beadwork while maintaining movement." A technical discussion followed, revealing Victoria's genuine knowledge of fashion construction, knowledge I hadn't realized she possessed. For perhaps the first time, we engaged as professionals with shared understanding rather than adversaries with competing agendas. As they prepared to leave, Victoria paused. "The expansion has transformed the space remarkably well. The Preservation Board made the right decision regarding the archway. Coming from Charleston's self-appointed guardian of architectural tradition, this represented significant acknowledgement. I accepted it with a simple, thank you, refusing to overanalyze the interaction or assign it more importance than it deserved." Later that evening, reviewing the day with Rebecca, I found myself laughing unexpectedly. "What's funny?" she asked, looking up from inventory records. "Just thinking about how far we've come," I replied. 2 years ago, Victoria destroyed my wedding dress, thinking it would derail my future. Today, she complimented my architectural choices. Life takes unexpected turns. "Speaking of unexpected," Rebecca said, setting aside her tablet, "the New York Fashion Institute called. They want you to deliver the keynote at next year's bridal symposium." The invitation represented national recognition from the industry's most prestigious educational institution, acknowledgement not just of commercial success, but of innovative contribution to the field. It was an honor typically reserved for designers with decades of establishment behind them, not relative newcomers from regional markets. "They specifically mentioned your atelier model," Rebecca continued. "Apparently, it's generating significant interest as a potential future for independent design houses." The news crystallized everything that had developed since that fateful wedding morning. What had begun as personal recovery from sabotage had evolved into pioneering new approaches to design production and creative training. The backup plan necessitated by crisis had expanded into innovation with industry-wide implications. As I contemplated the invitation, my thoughts returned to the destroyed wedding dress. Not with anger or resentment, but with something approaching appreciation for the clarity its destruction had ultimately provided. Victoria's scissors had inadvertently cut away constraints I had placed on myself, freeing me to pursue a more authentic and ultimately more successful vision. Later that week, a large envelope arrived at the atelier, bearing the Harrington family crest on expensive stationery. Inside was a formal invitation to design the gown for an upcoming Harrington family wedding, Victoria's great-niece Charlotte, who would be married the following spring at the family's historic plantation. A handwritten note accompanied the printed invitation. Olivia. Your work with Julia demonstrated exceptional understanding of individual needs while maintaining distinctive style. Charlotte would be fortunate to have your design perspective for her ceremony. Victoria Harrington. The carefully worded message wasn't quite an apology, but it represented something perhaps more significant: professional recognition from the woman who had once attempted to destroy both my creation and my confidence. Victoria would never admit her actions had been wrong, but she was acknowledging that my success was legitimate and my talent genuine. I placed the invitation on my design table, considering its implications. 2 years earlier, I might have read urgent meaning into this gesture, desperate validation from someone whose approval I had sought despite myself. Now I could evaluate it dispassionately, a business opportunity with a prestigious family, nothing more or less. After due consideration, I composed a response accepting the commission while establishing clear professional parameters regarding design authority and decision-making processes. The boundaries were not punitive, but clarifying. The foundation for a productive working relationship rather than a personal reconciliation. That evening, I shared the development with James over dinner at our favorite waterfront restaurant. "Are you comfortable working with her?" he asked after reading Victoria's note. "No one would blame you for declining." "Strangely, I am comfortable with it," I replied, surprising myself with the realization. Not because I've forgotten what she did, but because it no longer matters in the way it once did. Her actions shaped my journey, but they don't define my destination. James reached across the table, taking my hand. "You've built something remarkable, Liv. Not just the business, but yourself." As sunset painted Charleston Harbor in shades of pink and gold, I considered the journey from shattered silk to industry recognition. Victoria had believed destroying my wedding dress would demonstrate my inadequacy and prevent my entry into her world. Instead, it had catalyzed the authentic expression that would eventually earn her reluctant respect. The backup plan had never been just about an alternative dress. It had been about cultivating the resilience, creativity, and self-trust necessary to transform setbacks into opportunities. Victoria's scissors had cut fabric, but they had inadvertently released something far more powerful: a vision uncompromised by fear of disapproval or rejection. "To backup plans," I proposed, raising my glass in a toast. "And the unexpected journeys they begin." "To backup plans," James agreed, his eyes reflecting the same appreciation for how crisis had ultimately strengthened rather than diminished our path forward. May we always have them, and rarely need them. As we clinked glasses, I reflected on the perfect irony. Victoria had never imagined that in attempting to destroy what I had created, she would inadvertently help create something far more significant, not just a successful business or industry innovation, but a woman who no longer required external validation to recognize her own worth. That realization was the true masterpiece, more enduring than silk, more precious than beadwork, and more transformative than any dress could ever be. The 3rd anniversary of our wedding coincided with the completion of Charlotte Harrington's bridal gown, a project that had progressed with surprising smoothness despite initial concerns about Victoria's involvement. The finished creation hung in the private viewing room of my atelier, awaiting the bride's final fitting. A masterwork of architectural bodice transitioning into ethereal layers of hand-embroidered tulle, inspired by the historic Harrington plantation gardens where the ceremony would take place. "It's your best work yet," Rebecca declared as we made final adjustments to the display lighting. "Even Victoria won't find anything to criticize." "That would be a first," I replied, though without the bitterness that would have colored such a comment 2 years earlier. Working on Charlotte's gown had established an unexpected professional detente with my mother-in-law. Our interactions remained formal, but the undercurrent of hostility had gradually given way to grudging mutual respect. The final fitting was scheduled for the following morning, a private appointment before the atelier opened to other clients. I had arranged for champagne and pastries from Charlotte's favorite bakery, anticipating the emotional moment when a bride sees her completed gown for the first time. These moments of revelation had become my favorite part of the design process, transcending business transaction into meaningful human connection. That evening, James and I celebrated our anniversary, with a quiet dinner at home rather than joining the expected social engagements. Our townhouse balcony, overlooking Charleston's historic rooftops, had been transformed into a private dining space with string lights, flowers from our courtyard garden, and a menu recreating dishes from our honeymoon in Santorini. To 3. Years of proving people wrong, James toasted, raising his glass of Greek wine as twilight settled over the city. And to doing it our way, I added, clinking my glass against his. Contentment settled between us as we enjoyed the meal and conversation, professional successes and challenges interwoven with plans for an upcoming vacation and renovation ideas for the townhouse. Our lives had developed a comfortable rhythm, demanding but fulfilling, ambitious but anchored in genuine partnership. "I've been thinking," James said as we finished dessert, honey-drenched baklava paired with strong Greek coffee, "about expansion beyond Charleston." The suggestion wasn't entirely unexpected. My business had reached capacity within the current location, with waiting lists extending nearly a year for bridal commissions. Industry recognition had brought inquiries from potential clients across the country, many willing to travel to Charleston for fittings, but others seeking local access. To Olivia Chen Designs. "What sort of expansion?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. James had proven remarkably insightful about business development, his financial background complementing my creative focus. "Not traditional retail satellite locations," he clarified. "Something maintaining exclusivity while extending reach. Perhaps partnerships with select high-end retailers in key markets, trunk shows, limited collection pieces available through carefully chosen boutiques." The concept aligned with thoughts I'd been considering but hadn't fully articulated. Expansion without dilution was the challenge, growing the business while preserving the distinctive approach and quality that had built our reputation. "I've actually received inquiries along those lines," I admitted. "Bergdorf Goodman expressed interest in carrying a capsule collection for next season. And there's a boutique in San Francisco whose aesthetic aligns perfectly with our work." "That's fantastic, Liv." His pride was evident and uncomplicated by ego, one of the qualities I most treasured in our relationship. "Have you made any decisions?" "Not yet. The current projects are consuming all available resources: Charlotte's wedding, the scholarship, program launch, the keynote preparation. Expanding would require additional infrastructure we haven't established." Our conversation continued late into the evening, exploring possibilities and challenges without pressure toward immediate decisions. This balanced approach to life planning had become our hallmark, ambitious yet patient, strategic yet flexible enough to accommodate unexpected opportunities. The following morning arrived with Charleston's characteristic spring brilliance, clear blue skies and gentle warmth promising a perfect day for Charlotte's final fitting. I arrived at the atelier early to ensure everything was prepared, reviewing the gown once more for any imperfections requiring last-minute attention. Rebecca joined me shortly after, bringing fresh flowers for the viewing room and confirming the champagne delivery. "Charlotte just texted that they're running about 15 minutes behind schedule," she reported. "Apparently, Victoria insisted on stopping for coffee at that new French place on Meeting Street." Of course she did, I said with more amusement than annoyance. Victoria's insistence on controlling small details had once been infuriating. Now it seemed almost quaint. Predictable behavior from someone whose influence had diminished, but whose personality remained unchanged. When they finally arrived, Charlotte's excitement was palpable. At 24, she embodied the new generation of Harrington women, educated at prestigious universities, but returned to Charleston with contemporary ideas about continuing family traditions while modernizing their execution. She had specifically sought me out for her wedding gown, bypassing family politics to work with the designer whose aesthetic resonated with her vision. I haven't slept properly in days, she confessed as we guided her toward the private viewing room. I keep dreaming about the dress. Victoria followed, immaculately attired in a Chanel suit, her expression carefully composed. Charlotte has been rather enthusiastic, she acknowledged with typical understatement. Your work has certainly captured her imagination. The revelation moment lived up to expectations. When Charlotte first saw the completed gown, dramatically, lit against the viewing room's neutral backdrop, her hands flew to her mouth, eyes widening with emotion. It's perfect, she whispered, circling the display to view every angle. Exactly what I imagined, but somehow better. Even Victoria appeared, genuinely impressed, approaching the gown with uncharacteristic reverence. The construction is exceptional, she noted, examining the interior details with knowledgeable appreciation. This level of handwork is rarely seen anymore. The fitting proceeded smoothly, with Charlotte transformed by the gown in the way every designer hopes to witness, not merely wearing a beautiful garment, but embodying the fully realized vision of her wedding self. Minor adjustments were noted, champagne was poured, and photographs taken to document the moment. As Rebecca guided Charlotte to the changing area, Victoria lingered in the viewing room, studying design sketches displayed on the adjacent wall. Your upcoming collection? She inquired, gesturing toward conceptual drawings for pieces still in development. Yes, premiering at New York Bridal Fashion Week in October, I confirmed, slightly surprised by her interest. She nodded thoughtfully. The architectural influences are quite evident. Le Corbusier, perhaps. The accurate reference to the modernist architect whose work had indeed inspired certain structural elements caught me off guard. Victoria had always presented herself as a traditionalist, dismissive of contemporary design approaches. Yes, actually. His use of concrete forms translated into fabric structure is the central concept. Interesting adaptation, she commented, studying a particularly avant-garde bodice design. Bold, but I can see the commercial application beneath the runway presentation. This unexpectedly perceptive observation led to a surprisingly technical conversation about design methodology, revealing Victoria's substantial knowledge of fashion construction and history, knowledge she had never previously acknowledged in our interactions. For perhaps the first time, we engaged as professionals with shared understanding, rather than adversaries with competing agendas. As Charlotte emerged from changing, Victoria's demeanor shifted back toward her usual reserved formality, but something had altered subtly in our dynamic. A door had opened to a different kind of relationship, not friendship or even warm family connection, but professional respect based on genuine expertise rather than social positioning. Before we leave, Victoria said as the appointment concluded, I wanted to extend an invitation. She withdrew an envelope from her handbag, thick cream cardstock embossed with the emblem of Charleston's Historic Preservation Society. The annual Heritage Gala is next month. The planning committee would appreciate your participation on the fashion presentation panel. The invitation represented significant recognition within Charleston society. The Heritage Gala was the city's premier social event, bringing together old money families, cultural leaders, and emerging influencers for an evening celebrating Southern traditions while raising funds for preservation projects. The fashion presentation historically showcased established designers with connections to Southern heritage, not younger talents with contemporary approaches. The theme this year is Tradition Reimagined, Victoria continued. The committee feels your work exemplifies this concept rather effectively. Coming from Victoria, this constituted high praise indeed. I accepted the invitation with appropriate appreciation, recognizing it represented more than a social obligation. Victoria was publicly acknowledging my legitimate place in both the design world and Charleston society, territories she had once vigorously defended against my entry. After Charlotte and Victoria departed, Rebecca raised an eyebrow at the invitation I still held. The Heritage Gala? That's Victoria's sacred territory. Apparently the territory now has room for reimagined traditions, I replied, placing the invitation on my desk, including designers who weren't born into Southern aristocracy. Progress comes even to Charleston society, Rebecca observed wryly. Though I suspect your commercial success has accelerated Victoria's evolution toward acceptance. Probably, I acknowledged without resentment. Success changes how people see you, sometimes even how they see themselves in relation to you. This philosophical observation proved particularly relevant in the weeks that followed. Preparation for the Heritage Gala panel coincided with increased industry recognition as New York Bridal Fashion Week approached. Articles in major fashion publications highlighted my innovative atelier model and distinctive design aesthetic. Luxury retailers beyond Bergdorf Goodman expressed interest in exclusive collection pieces. The expansion possibilities James and I had discussed began materializing as concrete opportunities requiring active decisions rather than theoretical consideration. Amidst this professional whirlwind, an unexpected email arrived from a name I hadn't seen in years. Professor Daniela Rivera from the design school where I had completed my education before meeting James. The subject line read simply, "A proposal, worth considering." The message within was equally direct. The Fashion Institute was establishing a new program focused on sustainable and ethical production methods for luxury markets. They were seeking a designer in residence to help develop curriculum and mentor emerging talents while maintaining their own professional practice. Professor Rivera believed I would be the ideal inaugural appointment. Your innovative atelier model represents exactly the future direction we hope to encourage, she wrote. Creating systems that honor both creative vision and skilled craftsmanship, while establishing sustainable business practices. The opportunity was simultaneously flattering and challenging. Accepting would require significant restructuring of my current business operations, with extended periods in New York throughout the academic year, while maintaining client commitments in Charleston. Yet the potential impact, influencing the next generation of designers while advancing industry practices, aligned perfectly with values I had increasingly prioritized as my business matured. I forwarded the email to James with a simple question, "What do you think?" His response came within the hour. "I think you'd be extraordinary in this role. Logistics are solvable if this feels right to you." That evening, we discussed the opportunity in depth, practical considerations balanced against broader impact, career evolution weighed alongside personal priorities. By conversation's end, we had outlined a potential framework that would allow me to accept the position while maintaining my Charleston business through careful restructuring and strategic delegation. It would mean significant changes, I acknowledged, reviewing the drafted plan. For both of us. Change is what brought us here, James reminded me. I could easily increase my time in New York. The investment firm has been pushing for more direct involvement with East Coast clients anyway. His willingness to adapt his own professional arrangements to accommodate this opportunity touched me deeply. Throughout our relationship, James had consistently supported my ambitions without reservation, a steadfast belief in my capabilities that had provided foundation for growth even when external validation was lacking. The next morning, I responded to Professor Rivera expressing interest and requesting additional details about the position structure. Her enthusiastic reply arrived promptly, along with formal documentation outlining program goals, responsibilities, and compensation. The proposal exceeded my expectations in both creative scope and practical support, confirming this represented genuine opportunity rather than exploitative prestige appointment. My design team reacted to the possibility with mixed emotions: pride that their leader had received such recognition, concern about operational changes, excitement about potential expansion of their own responsibilities and professional development. These conversations revealed both strengths and vulnerabilities in the current business structure, highlighting areas requiring attention regardless of whether I accepted the academic position. Over the following weeks, preparations for Charlotte's wedding and the Heritage Gala proceeded alongside strategic planning sessions focused on potential business evolution. The parallel tracks created natural opportunities to test delegation of responsibilities that would become necessary if I accepted the New York position. Rebecca demonstrated particular aptitude for client management, while Julia showed unexpected talent for translating my design concepts into preliminary technical specifications. The Heritage Gala arrived amid this period of intensive assessment and planning. The historic Hibernian Hall had been transformed into an elegant showcase celebrating Charleston's architectural heritage while acknowledging contemporary interpretations. Projection mapping highlighted original structural details, while modern lighting created dramatic shadows and perspectives, visual representation of the tradition reimagined theme. The fashion presentation panel featured 4 designers discussing Southern influences in contemporary collections. As the most recently established designer included, I had anticipated potential skepticism from the traditionally minded audience. Instead, my comments about honoring construction techniques from Charleston's historical garment traditions, while incorporating modern technological innovations, received particularly enthusiastic response. "You've captured exactly what this event aims to celebrate," the panel moderator noted, "preserving what gives our heritage value while allowing it to evolve for future generations." During the reception that followed, I found myself approached by established figures from Charleston society who had previously maintained polite distance. Conversations revealed genuine interest in my design philosophy and business model, rather than mere social acknowledgement. The shift was subtle but significant: acceptance based on professional contribution rather than acquired Harrington connection. Victoria, elegant in vintage Oscar de la Renta, observed these interactions from slight distance before approaching as the evening concluded. "You presented your perspective quite effectively," she noted, her tone suggesting this outcome had surprised her despite extending the invitation. "Several board members mentioned your comments specifically." "Thank you for the opportunity," I replied with genuine appreciation. "It's important to me that innovation and heritage aren't positioned as opposing forces." She considered this statement thoughtfully. "They needn't be," she finally agreed, though finding productive balance requires discernment. Coming from Victoria, Charleston's self-appointed guardian of traditional propriety, this represented remarkable concession. Not wholesale embrace of change, certainly, but acknowledgement that evolution needn't threaten essential values when approached with appropriate respect for foundation. "Charlotte mentioned you're considering a position in New York," she continued, changing subjects with characteristic directness. "Part-time academic appointment?" The fact that she had this information wasn't particularly surprising. The Harrington family network remained extensively connected throughout Charleston society. Her neutral tone, however, represented departure from previous reactions to my professional developments. "It's a compelling opportunity," I confirmed. "Challenging to arrange logistically, but potentially very impactful." Victoria nodded, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts on this possibility. The fashion program there has excellent industry connections. Charlotte benefited significantly from her semester abroad with their Paris partnership. This previously unmentioned detail explained Victoria's unexpected knowledge of design, construction, and history. Her antagonism toward my career had masked genuine interest in and knowledge of the fashion industry, perhaps cultivated through her niece's educational pursuits. "The students would benefit from your technical innovations," she added after brief hesitation, "particularly your approach to structural elements." The comment, approaching actual endorsement of my professional capabilities, momentarily stunned me into silence. Victoria used this opportunity to excuse herself gracefully, leaving me to process this unexpected evolution in our complicated relationship. The following day brought Charlotte's wedding, a perfect spring celebration on the historic Harrington plantation. My completed gown received exactly the response every designer hopes to witness. Audible gasps as the bride appeared, the groom visibly moved, photographers scrambling for optimal angles to capture the architectural details illuminated by morning sunlight, filtering through ancient oak trees. "You've created something truly extraordinary," Henry Harrington commented during the reception, his genuine appreciation evident. Charlotte looked like a Harrington bride while remaining completely herself, exactly the balance she wanted. The success of the gown, and Victoria's unexpected quasi-endorsement of my potential academic position, provided clarity about the New York opportunity. The following week, after thorough discussion with my team and comprehensive planning, with James, I formally accepted Professor Rivera's offer for the inaugural designer-in-residence position. The decision necessitated significant restructuring of my business operations. Rebecca would manage client relations and production oversight during my New York periods. Julia would advance to associate designer status, developing technical specifications based on my conceptual direction. 2 additional specialists would be hired to maintain production quality and timeline adherence. The Charleston location would remain headquarters while we established limited satellite presence in New York to accommodate client needs during my academic residence periods. Announcing these changes generated precisely the industry attention Professor Rivera had anticipated. Fashion publications highlighted the innovative approach to designer education, practical industry leadership informing academic training, rather than theoretical instruction divorced from commercial realities. Several established designers expressed interest in similar arrangements at other institutions, suggesting potential industry-wide shift in approaches to fashion education. Locally, however, the most significant response came from unexpected quarter. 3 days after the formal announcement, an email arrived from Victoria Harrington with subject line, "Conversation request." The message itself was characteristically direct. "Your business restructuring presents potential synergies worth discussing. Available for lunch next Tuesday at Magnolia Room, 12:30. Victoria Harrington." The cryptic phrasing provided no indication of her intentions, leaving me curious, but cautious. After consulting with James, who proved equally mystified by his mother's outreach, I accepted the invitation with similarly concise response. The Magnolia Room represented neutral territory, neither Victoria's preferred traditional establishments nor my usual contemporary venues, but respected by both demographics for excellent cuisine and discreet service. I arrived precisely on time to find Victoria already seated at a corner table, offering both privacy and clear view of the restaurant entrance. Professional pleasantries occupied the first moments as menus were presented and water poured. Victoria ordered with characteristic precision, specific preparation requirements delivered politely but firmly to the attentive server. I selected more casually while wondering what actual purpose had prompted this unprecedented one-on-one meeting. "Your designer-in-residence position is quite significant," Victoria began once orders were placed. "The program has potential to influence production practices throughout the industry." "That's certainly the intention," I acknowledged. "Establishing more sustainable approaches while maintaining luxury standards." She nodded, apparently satisfied with this confirmation. The restructuring of your Charleston operations appears comprehensive, though certain aspects remain unaddressed in public announcements. This observation, accurate but unexpected, indicated Victoria had analyzed my business transition with surprising thoroughness. The public statements had indeed focused on staff advancement and production continuity rather than potential expansion. Challenges. Some details remain in development, I conceded, curiosity increasing about her purpose. Victoria sipped her water deliberately before continuing. You'll require enhanced client acquisition systems with your attention divided between locations, particularly for maintaining consistent commissioned work during academic periods. The assessment was precisely accurate, one of the primary concerns my team had identified during transition planning. Client relationships had previously depended heavily on my personal involvement from initial consultation through final fitting. Creating systems to maintain this high-touch experience with reduced direct participation represented significant challenge. We're exploring several approaches, I confirmed cautiously. I have a proposition, Victoria stated, setting down her water glass precisely, one that addresses this particular challenge while potentially benefiting multiple interests. What followed was entirely unexpected. Victoria outlined a structured collaboration between my studio and the Charleston Heritage Fashion Council, the organization she had founded and chaired for the past 15 years, connecting historical garment preservation with contemporary fashion education. The council maintained extensive relationships with prominent Southern families planning significant social events requiring custom formal wear. The council could implement referral protocols directing appropriate clients to your atelier, she explained with businesslike efficiency. Particularly during periods when your personal availability is limited by academic commitments. In exchange, your team would provide technical documentation of historical construction techniques encountered during commissioned work, contributing to the council's preservation archives. The proposal was remarkably well considered, addressing my specific business challenge while advancing Victoria's preservation interests through technical documentation. My team was uniquely qualified to provide. It represented perfectly balanced mutual benefit rather than one-sided advantage. That's quite thoughtful, I acknowledged, genuinely impressed by the strategic thinking behind her proposal. May I ask what prompted this particular idea? Victoria considered the question carefully before responding. Charlotte's wedding gown demonstrated something important, that traditional elements can be honored through innovative approaches rather than mere replication. The council's mission includes preserving heritage techniques for future viability, not simply historical documentation. She paused as our first courses arrived, waiting until the server departed before continuing. Additionally, your academic position presents opportunity to influence how heritage techniques are taught to emerging designers. The council has interest in ensuring Southern construction traditions receive appropriate attention in contemporary education. The explanation was logical and pragmatic, framed entirely in terms of organizational alignment, rather than personal reconciliation. Yet the mere fact of Victoria initiating such collaboration represented remarkable evolution from her previous antagonism toward my professional endeavors. The proposal has considerable merit, I responded after thoughtful consideration. I'd want to discuss specific implementation details with my team, particularly regarding documentation protocols and client selection criteria. Of course, Victoria agreed smoothly. I've prepared preliminary framework documents for your review. She produced a slim leather portfolio containing meticulously organized materials, process flowcharts, sample referral criteria, documentation templates, and draft agreement language. The thoroughness of the preparation revealed this wasn't spontaneous suggestion, but carefully developed strategic initiative. Victoria had clearly invested significant thought into this collaboration concept before requesting the meeting. As we reviewed the documents over lunch, our conversation evolved into unexpectedly productive professional exchange. Victoria's knowledge of historical garment construction complemented my contemporary production expertise, creating natural dialogue about preservation techniques and innovation possibilities. For perhaps the first time, we engaged as colleagues, with complementary knowledge rather than adversaries with competing agendas. When the meal concluded, we had established clear next steps: team consultations, document revisions, and follow-up meetings scheduled for the following week. The interaction had remained entirely professional, without personal references or acknowledgement of our complicated history. Yet something fundamental had shifted in our dynamic. Walking back to my atelier afterward, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from wedding dress destruction to potential business collaboration. Victoria had never apologized for her actions 3 years earlier, and likely never would. But her willingness to propose substantive professional partnership represented different kind of acknowledgement. Recognition that my business had established legitimate value within the very community she had once sought to protect from my influence. That evening, sharing the development with James, I found myself struggling to articulate the complex emotions the interaction had generated. "It's not reconciliation," I clarified as we discussed Victoria's proposal. "Not in personal terms. But it represents something important professionally." "Validation," James suggested thoughtfully. "Not that you needed it from her specifically, but there's satisfaction in having the person who tried to destroy your work now actively seeking to associate with it." "Exactly," I agreed, his insight capturing the essence of my response. "It feels like completion of a circle. Not through confrontation or revenge, but through simply becoming so undeniably successful that even Victoria had to acknowledge it." The collaboration with the Heritage Fashion Council proceeded from concept to implementation over subsequent months, functioning with surprising effectiveness alongside preparation for my academic position. Victoria maintained strictly professional interaction throughout, neither acknowledging our complicated history nor attempting personal connection beyond our aligned organizational interests. This arrangement suited me perfectly. I had no desire for false familial warmth or pretense that the wedding dress incident had never occurred. The professional respect now evident in our interactions represented appropriate evolution, neither lingering resentment nor artificial reconciliation, but practical recognition of changed circumstances and aligned interests. As my departure for the inaugural New York residency period approached, final preparations accelerated for both business transition and academic responsibilities. The restructured team demonstrated increasing confidence managing operations with reduced direct oversight. The satellite consultation space in Manhattan was completed with appropriate technological connections to the Charleston headquarters. Course materials and mentorship frameworks were developed in collaboration with Professor Rivera and program administrators. The evening before my departure, James and I hosted small gathering at our townhouse, core team members, close friends, and family supporters celebrating this significant professional evolution. The atmosphere combined genuine excitement with bittersweet awareness of changing daily connections. "To new chapters," Rebecca toasted, raising her glass as sunset painted Charleston's historic rooftops in golden light. "And the foundations that make them possible." The sentiment captured perfectly what this transition represented. Not abandonment of established success, but expansion built upon its solid foundation. The business would continue flourishing in Charleston while extending influence through both New York presence and academic impact. Henry Harrington attended the gathering, his genuine pride evident as he discussed the significance of the academic appointment with other guests. Victoria had declined the invitation with polite regret, citing previous commitment, maintaining professional collaboration without pretense of personal connection. After guests departed, James and I enjoyed final quiet moments on our balcony, the familiar Charleston soundscape, distant harbor bells, gentle evening breeze through palmetto leaves, occasional carriage tours on cobblestone streets, creating Peaceful backdrop for reflection. 3 years ago, I mused, gazing toward the harbor where wedding festivities had once concluded. I never imagined this particular path. That's what makes it remarkable, James replied, his arm comfortable around my shoulders. Victoria thought destroying your wedding dress would diminish you. Instead, it launched a journey neither of you could have anticipated. The observation crystallized something important about the entire experience. Victoria's attempt to control outcomes through destructive action had inadvertently created opening for much greater possibilities than might otherwise have developed. The backup plan necessitated by crisis had expanded into innovations with industry-wide implications and personal growth beyond original ambitions. The strongest structures often begin with unexpected foundations, I reflected, professional metaphor extending to personal journey. You adapt to change circumstances, reimagine possibilities, build something different than originally planned, but ultimately more authentic and resilient. As we prepared for significant transition, dividing time between Charleston heritage and New York innovation, balancing business leadership with academic influence, I recognized that Victoria's scissors had inadvertently cut away limitations rather than possibilities. The destruction meant to diminish had instead catalyzed extraordinary expansion and development. The backup plan had become the primary path, not through compromise or concession, but through recognizing opportunity where others perceived only disaster. Victoria had believed destroying a wedding dress would reveal inadequacy. Instead, it had demonstrated adaptability that would eventually transform not just a ceremony, but an entire business model and professional trajectory. To backup plans, I proposed, raising my glass in final toast before tomorrow's departure. And the unexpected journeys they begin. To backup plans, James agreed, clinking his glass against mine as Charleston's evening lights began illuminating the historic city we would always call home, regardless of how far new opportunities might lead. May we always have them, and rarely need them, but recognize their power when we do. The Manhattan skyline materialized through early morning fog as my flight descended toward JFK, skyscrapers emerging like sentinels guarding the island where the next chapter of my professional journey awaited. New York in September carried an energy unlike Charleston's genteel rhythm, a pulsing urgency that matched my own anticipation about the designer-in-residence position beginning that week. Ms. Chen Harrington? A driver stood at arrivals holding a discreet sign with the Fashion Institute's logo. Professor Rivera sends her apologies. She intended to meet you personally, but was called to an emergency board meeting. She'll connect with you at the apartment. The Institute had arranged temporary housing in a faculty building near campus, a beautifully appointed one-bedroom that would serve as my New York base during the academic appointment. James would join me on weekends when possible, while I would return to Charleston during academic breaks to maintain oversight of studio operations. The transition materials you requested are on the dining table, the driver noted as he helped with my luggage. Professor Rivera mentioned you might wish to review them before tomorrow's orientation. True to form, Daniela Rivera had prepared comprehensive documentation, course syllabi, student portfolios, departmental protocols, and facility specifications. The attention to detail reminded me why I had always respected her teaching methods during my own education. Nothing was left to chance or misinterpretation. I spent that first afternoon organizing my temporary home and reviewing materials, occasionally gazing out at the distinctly different urban landscape. Where Charleston offered historic rooflines and harbor vistas, my New York view featured water towers, fire escapes, and the constant motion of a city perpetually reinventing itself. The contrast felt appropriate for this professional expansion, maintaining roots in heritage while embracing innovation. Professor Rivera arrived precisely at 7, bearing dinner from a local Vietnamese restaurant, and barely contained enthusiasm about the program launch. The industry response has exceeded our expectations, she reported, as we settled at the dining table. 3 major design houses have requested special observation status for their development teams. The Sustainability Consortium wants documentation of our methodology. And student applications for your master classes required lottery selection. We could have filled each session 3 times over. Her excitement was contagious, though slightly overwhelming. The appointment had seemed more theoretical than real until this moment, despite months of preparation. Now, faced with concrete evidence of expectations and visibility, I felt momentary hesitation about my readiness for this expanded role. That's significant interest, I acknowledged, organizing spring roles on my plate. I hope the actual program lives up to the anticipation. Daniela studied me with the perceptive gaze that had intimidated students for decades. You're having second thoughts. Not second thoughts, I clarified, just recognizing the responsibility. Many people are investing time and resources based on my supposed expertise. Supposed? She raised an eyebrow. Olivia, you've revolutionized production methodology in an industry notorious for resisting change. Your atelier model has created viable alternatives to both mass production and isolated artisan approaches. That's not supposition, it's demonstrated innovation. Her matter-of-fact assessment helped settle my uncertainty. This wasn't imposter syndrome exactly, but the natural recalibration that occurs when transitioning between established competence and new challenge. Besides, she added with characteristic directness, doubting your capabilities hardly seems consistent with someone who created a backup wedding dress sophisticated enough to launch an entire career. I nearly choked on my spring roll. You know about that? The fashion industry thrives on dramatic narratives, she replied with a slight smile. Your wedding dress saga has achieved near mythical status. The vindictive mother-in-law, the destroyed gown, the triumphant reveal of something even more extraordinary. Whether entirely accurate or not, it's become shorthand for resilience under pressure. Learning my personal crisis had transformed into industry legend was unsettling, yet somehow appropriate. The experience had indeed defined my approach to both design and business development. Expect complications, prepare alternatives, trust your distinctive vision even when others can't see it yet. The actual story was less dramatic, I noted, though without detailed correction. Some narratives serve useful purposes regardless of precise accuracy. The results speak for themselves, Daniela said pragmatically. Now finish your dinner. Tomorrow will be intensively scheduled, beginning with departmental introductions at 8. She wasn't exaggerating. The orientation day unfolded with military precision, facility tours, faculty meetings, administrative briefings, and curriculum reviews flowing one into another with barely time to process each new component. The fashion Institute campus combined historical architecture with state-of-the-art technical facilities, reflecting the industry's dual relationship with tradition and innovation. My assigned studio space exceeded expectations. Corner location with abundant natural light, adjacent classroom for small group instruction, and private consultation area for individual mentoring. The production lab featured equipment ranging from centuries-old looms to cutting-edge digital fabrication tools, allowing exploration across traditional and emerging techniques. Most impressive, however, were the students selected for the inaugural program cohort. 24 designers representing diverse backgrounds, technical approaches, and career aspirations had been chosen from hundreds of applicants. Their portfolios demonstrated exceptional promise combined with distinctive perspective, precisely the combination the program sought to nurture. We didn't select based solely on technical proficiency, explained Professor Rivera during student introductions. We prioritized innovative thinking and sustainability commitment alongside execution capability. These aren't just skilled craftspeople. They're potential industry transformers. The students regarded me with mixture of respect and evaluation. My reputation had secured their attention, but my actual contribution remained unproven. This Healthy skepticism felt refreshing after Charleston's more deferential approach to established success. In New York, credentials reset with each new venture. Past achievements guaranteed nothing about future performance. The program structure allocated my time across several functions: teaching masterclasses on signature techniques, providing individual mentorship to selected students, conducting research on sustainable production methods, and maintaining my own design practice through the satellite consultation space established in Chelsea. This balanced approach was intended to demonstrate viable integration of academic contribution with commercial practice. My first master class was scheduled for the second day, a demonstration of architectural bodice construction adapted for varied body types. 24 students watched with focused attention as I explained fundamental principles that had become signature elements in my bridal designs. The traditional approach treats different measurements as problems requiring correction, I explained, indicating technical diagrams projected behind me. This inherently communicates that certain bodies are wrong and need disguising or alteration towards some arbitrary ideal. I advanced to the next slide showing my alternative methodology. Instead, we can approach structural design as conversation, with the body's actual architecture, working with rather than against natural proportions. This creates garments that honor individual structure while achieving desired aesthetic effects. The demonstration continued with practical application, draping techniques demonstrated on 3 dress forms representing significantly different body types, each receiving unique structural approach that achieved similar visual impact through different technical means. Questions? I invited as the demonstration concluded. A forest of hands immediately rose. Not the polite, carefully framed queries I typically received in Charleston contexts, but challenging technical interrogations reflecting genuine engagement with the material. The students didn't want superficial understanding. They demanded comprehensive explanation of both methodology and philosophy informing the techniques. How does this approach scale for production beyond custom application? Asked Imani Sanders, a student whose portfolio had demonstrated particular interest in accessible luxury concepts. That's precisely the question this program exists to explore, I acknowledged. Custom approaches traditionally sacrifice accessibility for personalization. But by identifying modular components within seemingly custom techniques, we can develop adaptable systems rather than one-off solutions. The discussion expanded into manufacturing implications, economic considerations, and sustainability impacts, territory far beyond basic technique demonstration. Students built upon each other's questions, creating collaborative exploration that pushed my own thinking about potential applications. As the session concluded, Professor Rivera nodded approvingly from her observation position. "You've given them substantial material to develop," she commented as students gathered materials and continued discussions among themselves. "And they've given you equally valuable challenge." She was right. The students' questions had identified several underdeveloped aspects of my methodology, areas where intuitive practice hadn't yet been fully systematized for teaching or scaling. Addressing these gaps would require deeper articulation of processes I had implemented but not completely formalized. This pattern continued through subsequent sessions. Each teaching interaction generated reciprocal development, students gaining technical insights while challenging me to refine conceptual frameworks and expand application possibilities. The exchange created dynamic learning environment benefiting all participants regardless of positional hierarchy. Individual mentoring sessions revealed similar mutual benefit. Weekly meetings with 6 selected students provided opportunity for focused development of their specific projects, while offering insight into emerging approaches I might not otherwise encounter. Their fresh perspectives often identified alternative applications for techniques I had developed within limited contexts. Maya Fitzgerald, a particularly innovative textile student, demonstrated this exchange during our 3rd mentoring session. She had applied my structural pleating technique to recycled materials, creating unexpected dimensionality from formerly flat, discarded textiles. I adapted your tension mapping system, she explained, indicating subtle structural elements hidden within seemingly decorative surface treatments. But instead of using it for body contouring, I'm employing it to strengthen compromised materials while creating visual interest that disguises their original condition. The application represented genuine innovation, taking established methodology into entirely new territory with significant sustainability implications. Discarded textiles typically lost dimensional stability through wear or processing, limiting their reuse potential. Maya's adaptation potentially extended material life cycle, while creating distinctive aesthetic value impossible with virgin materials. This is remarkable, I acknowledged, examining the sample garment's interior construction. Have you tested structural limitations under different stress conditions? That's actually where I need guidance, she admitted. My background is primarily creative rather than technical. I understand the theoretical principles but lack experience with rigorous testing protocols. This conversation exemplified the program's intended function, connecting innovative concepts with practical development methodology while bridging creative and technical approaches. I arranged access to the Institute's materials testing laboratory and introduced Maya to sustainable engineering experts who could help quantify her innovation's performance characteristics. Similar exchanges characterized my interactions with other mentees. Jordan Chen, no relation, was developing biodegradable interfacing materials requiring specialized construction techniques. Layla Patel had created zero-waste pattern systems, needing commercial viability assessment. Each project represented potential industry advancement while providing fresh perspective on established practices. Balancing these academic responsibilities with ongoing business commitments proved challenging but manageable. The Chelsea consultation space operated 3 days weekly, allowing New York clients to connect with my design process without Charleston travel. Advanced communications technology facilitated remote oversight of Charleston operations, with daily briefings from Rebecca ensuring continuity and problem resolution. The collaboration with Victoria's Heritage Fashion Council functioned with surprising effectiveness. Their referral protocol directed appropriately aligned clients to my atelier while securing detailed documentation of historical techniques encountered during commissioned work. The arrangement maintained business volume during my partial absence, while advancing preservation objectives important to Charleston's cultural institutions. 6 weeks into the academic appointment, I received unexpected communication from Victoria herself, not regarding client matters but requesting technical consultation on preservation challenge. The Charleston Museum had acquired damaged historical garments requiring specialized assessment before conservation treatment. Your expertise in structural restoration would be valuable, she wrote with characteristic directness. Documentation indicates techniques similar to those you've adapted for contemporary application. Museum conservators would appreciate your perspective during preliminary examination. The request represented significant evolution in our professional relationship, Victoria specifically seeking my technical opinion rather than merely tolerating my involvement through formal arrangements. After consulting my schedule, I arranged brief Charleston visit coinciding with necessary business oversight, allocating specific time for the museum consultation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.